The Young and the Restless that is dragging on way too long. Soaps are known for dragging out storylines, and on The Young and the Restless, there's one in particular many of us are growing weary of. Claire's, Hayley Erin, trust issues regarding Kyle, Michael Miller. She is upset with him over the fact that he kissed Audra, Zuleika Silva, in France and kept it a secret from her. Claire has taken many weeks to figure out whether or not she wants to forgive him and give him a second chance. But she still hasn't made up her mind. What transpired on The Young and the Restless on Tuesday? Kyle keeps trying to make amends with Claire on The Young and the Restless image. CBS. On Tuesday's episode of The Young and the Restless, we saw Kyle trying, yet again, to make it up to Claire. How many more weeks are we going to have to endure Kyle's expression of pain? How much longer are we going to hear the same dialogue between Claire and Kyle, Claire and Victoria, Amelia Heinley, and Claire and all her other friends and family who have given her romantic advice? Kyle has been knocking himself out trying to get their romance back on track. A couple of weeks ago, he offered her an engagement ring and asked her to marry him. On Tuesday, he asked her to go on a trip with him to Paris. Why can't he figure out that he doesn't need to offer her any grand gestures, gifts, or trips to Europe? The only thing he needs to offer her is an apology for what he did wrong, which he has given her time and again. Claire keeps saying she needs time to think everything over. Maybe she should take that time by going on a trip alone. That way, she could do some soul-searching without Kyle constantly begging her for a second chance, which fans are tired of seeing him do. We would also benefit from Claire going on a solo trip because it would give us a break from seeing her in limbo with Kyle. Then there's the Holden factor. Holden's presence created even more angst for Kyle and Claire on The Young and the Restless image. CBS. Kyle is jealous of Holden, Nathan Owens, and bothered by the fact that Claire trusts him. He's used to being in triangles that involve him and two women, like when Summer, then Hunter King, and Lola, Sasha Kaye, were both in love with him. But Kyle isn't used to competing with another man for a woman. So maybe a healthy dose of competition is what he needs and what we need to liven up this storyline and move it along. Since Claire is about to start her new job in the publishing division of Chancellor Industries, we might be able to move the story along by having Kyle observe a close embrace between Claire and Holden if she doesn't travel alone. Sure, an embrace isn't as intimate as a passionate kiss, but it would be intimate enough to ruffle Kyle's feathers and create some sparks to drive this storyline ahead. What was Holden's smile about? On The Young and the Restless, Holden appears to be targeting Kyle. Photograph courtesy of CBS. Holden approached Kyle and Claire at their table at Crimson Lights and apologized for causing any problems between them. Claire left the table to answer the phone when her mother called. Holden asked Kyle whether they were good. Kyle told him straight up, "No, we're not good. We never will be." Holden grinned slyly. What was that about? Maybe it was his way of throwing down the gauntlet and saying, "I'm tired of playing nice with you, Kyle. I'm going to pursue her myself if you and your girlfriend can't come to an agreement. Consider yourself warned." Now that Holden is going to LA to close out the offices there for Kane, Billy Flynn, maybe Claire will miss him in his absence. Maybe she will recall how he expressed his feelings to her last week. That could drive the storyline forward, because maybe she will realize she wants both him and Kyle or just Holden. We only know that this The Young and the Restless storyline needs to end to figure out if she still wants Kyle. Too much time and attention have been spent on Claire and Kyle spinning their wheels, with no forward motion. If their time has come and gone, let them say their goodbyes for good, or maybe reconnect at a future time when they are both ready. The constant cycle of Kyle and Claire's impasse, if there is one thing that viewers of soap operas who have been watching for a long time are aware of, it is the tendency for certain storylines to last much longer than they should. The Young and the Restless has delivered some brilliant arcs over the years. Plots that sizzled with romance, betrayal, business intrigue, and family feuds. But every now and then, there is a storyline that drags on for too long and keeps going back and forth between the same emotional beats, making the characters and the audience feel like they are stuck in a never-ending loop. The most obvious illustration of this exhausting repetition at the moment is Claire's prolonged trust crisis with Kyle. Her inability to decide whether or not to forgive him for kissing Audra has been simmering for weeks, yet the situation feels as though it hasn't budged an inch. The soap seems to be running in circles, revisiting the same conversations and dilemmas, without rewarding the audience with any real movement forward. The central issue is simple. Kyle kissed Audra during a trip to France, and he concealed the truth from Claire. Claire was clearly upset when the secret was revealed. Trust, once broken, is difficult to rebuild, and her hesitancy made sense, for a time. However, the plot has stalled, and neither a reconciliation nor a breakup have occurred immediately. Claire repeatedly tells Kyle she needs time to think. Kyle repeatedly apologizes and makes dramatic gestures. Other characters repeatedly give Claire advice she doesn't act on. The show seems to be content replaying variations of this same script. Each week feels like déjà vu, with only slight changes in setting or tone. This pattern has created an exhausting loop that diminishes the emotional impact of what should have been a compelling storyline about betrayal and second chances. The issue with incessant apologies and exaggerations at the heart of this storyline stagnation is Kyle's misguided strategy for winning Claire back. To demonstrate their devotion, soap heroes and heroines frequently make grand romantic gestures, and sometimes those moments work beautifully. They can be dramatic turning points that reignite passion or bridge divides. However, Kyle has been trapped in a cycle of grand gestures that fail. First, he offered Claire an engagement ring, essentially trying to push her into a lifelong commitment before she had even processed his betrayal. Following that, on Tuesday's episode, he extended an invitation to her to Paris in the hope that the allure of romance in the City of Light would allay her mistrust. The issue is that Claire needs authenticity and space, not diamonds or airline tickets. Kyle has offered numerous excuses. In fact, his remorse is one of the storyline's most consistent notes. But the more he repeats himself without producing new insights or giving Claire genuine breathing room, the more hollow his apologies feel. Soap fans can appreciate persistence in love stories, but persistence without growth quickly becomes monotonous. Every time Kyle shows up with yet another plea, another offer, another attempt to convince Claire, the audience sees the same pained expression on his face. The lack of variety in his approach highlights the lack of variety in the writing. Viewers don't want to watch the same conversation play out with only minor tweaks. They want progression, either Claire taking steps toward forgiving him or deciding firmly that she cannot. Claire's paralysis and the audience's frustration. Claire's side of the story isn't faring much better. At first, I felt sorry for her because she continues to insist that she needs time. Trust issues cannot be solved overnight, and her hesitation was believable. But the longer she remains frozen in indecision, the less compelling her conflict becomes. Instead of looking like a strong woman carefully evaluating her options, she risks coming across as passive, trapped in a repetitive holding pattern. Soap operas thrive on forward motion, even when storylines are deliberately drawn out. A love triangle, for instance, may stretch for months or even years, but it typically does so by introducing new developments, betrayals, or power shifts that keep the audience engaged. Those escalation points have not occurred in Claire and Kyle's impasse. She has talked to her mother Victoria, she has sought advice from friends, and she has aired her doubts repeatedly. Yet she has not acted on any of that input. The absence of meaningful decision-making makes her seem stagnant. Instead of wrestling with evolving dilemmas, she is stuck reliving the same dilemma endlessly. The lack of progression, not the storyline's length, is what makes it feel like it drags on for too long. Holden is the potential lifeline of the story. One bright spot in this otherwise repetitive saga is the introduction of Holden. His presence injects a badly needed dose of tension. Unlike Kyle, who is desperate to hold on to Claire at any cost, Holden exudes quiet confidence and subtle flirtation. He doesn't push, but when Kyle said, "We're not good," he slyly smiled. "We never will be," said everything. It was the smirk of a man who sees an opportunity. Whether he is genuinely interested in Claire romantically or merely enjoys ruffling Kyle's feathers, Holden's involvement offers the possibility of shaking up the storyline. Kyle has been in love triangles before, but most of the time he finds himself caught between two women who want his affection. Now, the tables are turned. Holden is the rival, and Kyle is the one who must contend with the threat of losing Claire. This reversal could add layers of vulnerability to Kyle, who is often portrayed as confident, ambitious, and used to being in control. It could also give Claire a real option to choose from rather than continuing to stall indefinitely. Claire's indecisiveness may finally come to an end if Holden is a new and dependable alternative to Kyle. The drama and sparks they've been waiting for would finally arrive for the audience, desperate for movement. Missed opportunities for story advancement. Unfortunately, even with Holden's presence, the show has so far failed to capitalize on its opportunities. For instance, a scene where Kyle walks in on Holden and Claire sharing a close embrace could have reignited the storyline with explosive energy. It wouldn't need to be a kiss, even an embrace charged with unspoken intimacy would have been enough to ignite Kyle's jealousy, push Claire into a position where she had to articulate her feelings, and signal to the audience that things were finally escalating. Instead, the show keeps dancing around the tension, hinting at sparks without letting them catch fire. Similarly, Holden's sly grin at Kyle could have led to immediate fallout, perhaps Holden openly declaring his intentions to Claire, or Kyle confiding in Jack about his jealousy. Instead, the moment passed without consequence, leaving viewers wondering whether the show will ever pull the trigger on this triangle. Missed opportunities like these are why the storyline feels stagnant. It's not just that it's dragging, it's that every potential turning point is being deferred, delayed, or diluted until the tension evaporates. The cost of wheel spinning. When soap operas stall like this, the costs are significant. There is a decrease in audience engagement, and frustration grows. Viewers who invest hours each week in watching The Young and the Restless expect payoff. They want to see characters make choices, relationships evolve, and conflicts deepen or resolve. When weeks go by without progress, fans start to feel that their time is being wasted. They vent on social media, they disengage from the storyline, and some may even stop tuning in altogether. The risk for The Young and the Restless is that the Kyle-Claire saga could become one of those infamous storylines that fans groan about for years, remembered not for its emotional resonance but for how unbearably long it dragged on without resolution. This would be a shame because the plot involves betrayal, trust issues, rivalry between lovers, and family dynamics, all of which make for compelling drama. However, even the juiciest ingredients spoil if there is no forward motion. The need for resolution, one way or another. Ultimately, the only way to salvage this storyline is to push it toward resolution. That doesn't mean Kyle and Claire must reunite happily, nor does it mean they must break up permanently. Either path could work, as long as it represents decisive action. If Claire realizes she cannot forgive Kyle, then ending things would free both characters for new storylines and new romantic possibilities. If she decides to forgive him, then the show could shift focus to the challenges of rebuilding trust and dealing with lingering insecurities. Both options would be better than the current limbo, which is satisfying no one. Even a temporary separation could serve as a reset button. Perhaps Claire decides she needs to be on her own for a while, focusing on her career at Chancellor Industries. This would create natural distance from Kyle while keeping the door open for a future reunion. In the meantime, Holden could step more prominently into her orbit, creating fresh storylines. What matters most is movement. Soap storylines thrive on evolution, not endless repetition. Conclusion. A storyline in desperate need of change. The Kyle and Claire storyline on The Young and the Restless has reached a critical tipping point. What began as a believable conflict rooted in betrayal has devolved into a monotonous loop of apologies, indecision, and recycled conversations. The characters and the fans both deserve better. The introduction of Holden offers a glimmer of hope, but only if the writers commit to using him to propel the story forward. Otherwise, this arc risks becoming one of the most tedious in recent memory. It's time for The Young and the Restless to make a choice, just as Claire must. Will the show allow this storyline to continue circling endlessly, or will it give the audience the drama, sparks, and resolution they crave? The clock is ticking, and patience is running thin. Soap fans are loyal, but even the most loyal fans can grow weary when a storyline drags on far too long.